Let me give you a brief into the session. How many ESG officers does it take to change a light bulb? Maybe just one? Yes, but they will need to do a full impact assessment first. And this will be the only session of the day where there'll be a party, an ESG party. So, what on earth is ESG? The question that we are pondering upon. Vipul Arora, the author of The Essence of ESG, will give us a primer on all things ESG. And Radhica Kanniganti, who leads sustainability initiatives at Wipro, will provide some real world examples of the same. We'll be talking about why you and I should care about ESG. Without any further delay, let me take this opportunity to invite our guests onto the dais. Can we have a huge round of applause for Mr. Vipul Arora, Radhika Kanniganti, and Madhur Singh onto the dais? Everybody. As we all know, Mr. Vipul Arora is the author of The Essence of ESG, a practitioner's perspective. Radhika Kanniganti is a leader of ESG and sustainability at Wipro. Madhur Singh is the former managing editor and editor at India Editor, Eco Business, Festival Curator, and so on and so forth. So without wasting any more time, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for coming back after lunch and joining us here. Before I start, we all know who we are. They've been introduced, I've been introduced. I'd like to begin with a question for all of you in the audience. Do we all understand what the good organizers of this festival mean when they say ESG party? Could you please raise your hands if you understand what they mean by that? Wow. Oh gosh, that's just one hand. All right. Okay, a few more. Thank you for being so candid. How many of us really understand what is ESG? Yes. Do we know beyond? Do we understand the concept? Or just trying to get a sort of baseline analysis so that we know where to sort of pitch our own talk. Okay, almost nobody. That's very, very interesting. Thank you, you do. Okay, great. So let me start by asking Vipul to do the exact opposite of writing a book. I'm going to request him to give us a 5-minute crash course, a primer into ESG. What is ESG? Where has the concept come from? How has it evolved? And also, what sort of a juncture are we at today that we're talking about an ESG party, right?
So the customers these days are so demanding. You know, it took me a long time to just write a 3-4 hour readable book. Now there is an expectation to explain what is a party, and then you want it in 5 minutes. Great. So, well, I'll make an attempt. So, you know, ESG is a framework in very simple terms. It's a way of analyzing things. It came in from the investment world. You know, investment world typically, so it's in the business context, you know, that it started. So companies are analyzed, looked at by investors from financial criteria for many, many years. But then they were like, they could not predict the future of the company, the growth rate. And you had to speculate, you had to make guesses. And those guesses could go wrong because millions and billions and trillions are riding on those, you know, share price investments on the shares. So then there was this need for something more, you know, because financial data is all backward looking. So is there something that could help you predict the future growth rate to a higher degree of confidence? So this is why ESG came in 2004. The word was coined by a UN-led, UNEP-FI-led special report. The entire history is here. but quickly what they realized was that ESG means environment, social, and corporate governance data points, which anyways every business has to deal with. These are all operational data points. Investors never looked at them before, but now if you start looking at them, you actually get an insight into how the company is going to be. It's like analyzing a 10-year-old kid to see how they will be at 25 years of age, you know, what career they can go into, what will be their future potential, things like that. So financial past data doesn't help you, but ESG in terms of how you're using your environmental resources, how you're using your, you know, people. S is all about people, whether it is internally in the firm or it's external people. So internally means employees, labor, contractors, etc., etc. Externally, it's customers, suppliers, all types of people, regulators, how you deal with them, etc. So, and the society at large. And the governance is how you govern yourself as a business. What kind of ethics do you follow? Are you fair? Are you balanced? Do you have any guiding principles, or you're just there to make a quick buck and disappear after some time from the stock market? So those are the type of criteria. And research shows that it's companies that do really well on ESG, actually in the long run, they outperform. We'll stop there. There are some controversies also around this, but we'll keep it for another session.
Right. Thank you, Vipul. I'm going to ask Radhika, who represents the corporate sector here. Are businesses happy to take this view, this very optimistic view that if I gather and analyze and report my ESG data, it is going to be good for my business? Are all corporates taking that enlightened view, or are they able to take that enlightened view? Because not all corporates are big and large and have deep pockets. So how is it really working? Is it largely government-oriented, regulation and mandate-oriented? Or is there enough of consumer pressure today? Or is it also enlightened corporate self-interest?
Thanks, Madhur, and nice being here. And thanks, Vipul, for the entire landscape that you explained. I just want to add one thing to that before I answer your question. I just want to ask the audience if you know what is sustainability. You know what is sustainability? Yeah, see a lot of nods and hands and stuff. So ESG, I mean, if you look at a corporate, right, and you say you have to be a sustainable corporate, a sustainable business, what does it even mean, right? I mean, where does a corporate even begin to look at their sustainability? So ESG actually provides that framework on how do you environment and planet and at large. So, but today, I think everybody wants to get on to this ESG bandwagon, ESG party, if you will. So you see a lot of businesses actually moving towards, ESG, and partly I think there are two forces here playing out. One is a huge push from customers. Customers want to engage with businesses who are following some of these ESG principles, sustainability principles. And of course, government. We have SEBI now, and we have a lot of regulations coming down from Europe that are mandating some of these frameworks. So we're talking about the ESG party. If you're not there yet, you better be there. So I think it is coming down the line, and you find a lot more businesses sort of jumping onto this bandwagon.
That's great.
So I just want to add, so actually that came. But then all these people could not analyze unless companies report in a standard way. So standards came, that's what we refer to GRI. There are many others. But then not every company would follow a standard because they were voluntary in the beginning. So then they started putting pressure on regulators. So the laws came on this. So that's why it became mandatory now in different countries, including India on BRSR. And therefore now companies had to do it at scale. Obviously, enlightened companies, like Wipro, there are several other startups and all the leadership companies who are in the leadership bracket in each industry, they were anyways doing this for many years. Doesn't matter what it was called, ESG or sustainability or anything else. There was time when it was not called anything at all. It was just commonsensical way of running a business. Because if you think long term, you would pay attention to how your resources are used, you would pay attention to how you take care of your people, and you would make sure that you are taking care of your ethics as well. You're not taking any shortcuts, otherwise you will have branding problems later. So this is the entire chain that connects. So for leaders, it was always there. For the majority, now it has become mandatory. And because of that, the supply chains and everything. So this is like the complete, thanks.
Yeah, one of the sort of points in time that is considered like the big bang in ESG was when Bloomberg started reporting ESG data, right? And it was a very investor-focused product that they were taking out. So is there some sort of an ESG alpha in India? Are businesses that are ESG aligned able to attract more capital, more venture capital and investment from various quarters because they're ESG aligned? Is that happening in India? I'll ask Vipul to take it first.
So I think ESG maturity. Companies are at different stages. There are beginners, there are those who are doing compliance, there are those who are then saying, okay, I can actually cut my costs, not just make a report. I can actually reduce my cost, I can also make better profits. Then there is another stage where they start to show leadership. And then there's a last stage where they actually start to transform the world. So there are 5 stages in this maturity. And companies who are really in the advanced stages, you know, you don't have to tell them to do it or not to do it. They're doing it out of self-interest because they believe in it. Tata's is a great example, you know, simply for the fact that they've been doing it for 150 years. Globally, there are very few groups. You can count it on your fingers. And these are companies that have lasted 500 years. There is a company that lasted some 700 years. It's in Japan. So if you do a historical search on corporates, there are very few companies that last so long, and groups even more difficult. And Wipro is another example. You know, the entire governance structure shows kind of massive amount of shareholding is now sitting in a foundation, and the foundation kind of puts back into the society and invests in other things, infrastructure building and so on. So there are, for the large companies, there are clear gains because you have an entrenched trust. You know, the moment you say that word of the company or the brand, you have trust from investors, you have trust from shareholders, you have trust from all the other kind of ecosystems. And that has precious value. You know, when trust is lost, we see things like what happened with Paytm, right? When trust was lost, suddenly a huge amount of wealth lost. Byju's is another example. We have a session, I think, on Byju's later. Corporate governance issue, right? So $22 billion valuation, now it's $5 billion valuation. So people think that all these things, let me first make money quickly, and then I will get more robust or I'll get more responsible. It doesn't happen. In normal life, it doesn't happen. You don't give the key of a Jaguar to a 12-year-old kid. If you do, or a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, whatever, if you do, you know what happens, right? Accidents, they get killed or people get killed. In the same way, you don't give money to companies that are not responsible, whether they are startups or whether they are large. So ESG as a framework, I think the heart of it is, are you responsible? Let me do a little bit of promotion here. The second book that I'm about to publish, which is in the works, which came out actually while writing this one, because it was so much coming out, first time I'm writing, and then I realized this is too much information, so I carved it out into a second book. There I'm going to cover principles. So I've rated thousands and thousands of companies for about 17 years. So I've seen patterns. Companies that follow certain principles across their entire culture and decision making, they last very long. And companies that don't follow those principles, they disappear very quickly or over some time due to a crisis. So actually, responsibility is one of those principles. So coming to the responsibility concept, the ESG is all about being responsible. If you could summarize it in one word.
Yeah. I don't know what else I can add to what Vipul has said, but I think I take one word from that: trust. I think that trust is what is like, you know, the foundation of it. How do you trust a company, and that trust is sort of the forms of basis of why a company needs to be responsible, needs to take care of its people, planet, employees, and whatnot. So you specifically talked about investments. Yes, there is an impact. And there's definitely an impact, with the investor community. Today there are any number of ratings, right, on ESG. Of course, investors use their own set of ratings, and there is a certain score that you need to get for the investor community to have that trust in you as a company. There is a certain score that you need to get for customers to have trust in you as a company. So I think it all boils down to that one word.
Yeah, that's very interesting, but one also hears from everybody one speaks to in the business world that the Indian customer is very value interested. He or she is very conscious of how much they're spending.
Sorry, I had to get on to this, but when you say value, right? What is value?
Price. I was going to say that. I was going to come to that. So, you know, growing up, you had a neighborhood kirana store. And if you think back, most of these stores did not even have a dustbin, right? We didn't care how they were managing their waste, what they were doing with their employees, as long as they were delivering kirana to the house and not overcharging us, right? And some people would also run these long khatas, you know, like accounts, pay at the end of the month, pay after 2-3 months. And that's all people cared about. Is that not still true for the Indian consumer? Isn't the Indian consumer still very price-oriented, price-conscious? to the extent that they would care less about how they're treating their employees or what they're doing with their waste.
It's a good point. I think, as Vipul mentioned, there's kind of difference in the sustainability maturity of different companies, right? So when you're talking about the, and similarly, there's a difference in the sustainability maturity understanding of employees or customers, right? So if today you see the new generation, they want sustainable products, right? They want to, they believe in companies that are following certain, principles, or certain kind of practices, right? So they will demand those, they will demand it. But then you find others, and of course, India is a vast country with, different strata of economy. So obviously there is, that kind of awareness is not there in large sections of our communities. So, but I think it's just a matter of time. It is a matter of time when every single person will sort of demand this of their products, demand this of the. It may take longer in some communities. It may, it's in a place like Bangalore. I'm sure. Everybody wants organic, wants sustainable materials. They understand this, right? But that understanding may not be as clear in, say, tier 2, tier 3 cities. So, but it is a matter of time. And I think it starts with, it also starts with companies. Companies sort of emulating that and sort of talking about it, making it their brand, making it their purpose. And I think that's the kind of responsibility that companies do have.
I just want to add one thing to the pricing aspect. So price also, the economic cost is not the full cost. So there is there are so many, there's this economists use this term called externalities, which means there's a lot of hidden costs that don't show up in the price. So diamonds that you buy, there was a lot of slavery going in earlier. The food that we eat, we don't know how many chemicals are embedded into it, due to use of excessive fertilizer, pesticide. The food is very cheap, mass produced, but 50 years later, you're going to have cancer. If you see the Punjab, Haryana, the belt, agriculture belt that creates the maximum amount of rice and wheat, and I come from there actually. This is real stuff. I'm not, this is real stuff. I see people there dying. Every time I visit my family, increasing rate of, and it's documented. Go to Niti Aayog, see the amount of data. The highest amount of cancer rates in India are in Punjab and Haryana. Farmers are selling their lands and going away to other states or relocating to Europe or US, right? So land is becoming infertile. So this is the cost. You don't have to look at cost just now. You have to look at the total cost, over a long life cycle. So what ESG is telling us, think long term. Think about 5 steps down the consequence chain. Don't think just right in this moment, because that price is very deceptive, that just one number.
Thank you both. I'm curious, and I'm sure all of us would like to hear about some companies, large and small, maybe even startups, that have got their ESG journey going in the right direction. Can you share some case studies with us?
So, ESG, there are clear problems around in India and around the world. On the environment side, nature is getting destroyed, a lot of data is there, land, air, we don't have clean air, we don't have clean water, destruction of forests. 6 trillion forests were there when humanity was born, now we have 3 trillion forests. You're going to have climate change, and you keep polluting with more and more fossil fuel burning. So there's a problem there. There's a problem on the social side. Equity in terms of inclusive growth, right? Green products, always, why should they have premium? You can get away with it for a little while, but it needs to be there for everybody. Governance, trust issues, get rich quick schemes, people wanting to make a quick buck and getting away, quickly. So anybody who wants to solve these problems in a concerted way is going to be successful in the long run. So there are startups who are by design solving either a piece or the whole gamut of problems. You have obviously Mitti Cool, for example, a fridge born in India, made from mud, and giving employment to people who are, in the villages who are actually making that. Obviously it needs to see more scale. Unfortunately, we don't celebrate Indian success stories so much these days. Everything has to come from the West for us to really consider it a fashion. Same thing happened to ESG, by the way. Even though I feel ESG has been in India for thousands of years, but that's another topic. So Mittikul is there. There's another firm in Delhi, incubated in IIT Delhi, called Tadpole. And it's also in IMB's NSR cell kind of incubation center. They've created a retrofit. So everybody is going gaga over EVs. EVs are good. They have some problem as well. So there's a little bit of good and there's a little bit of bad. But there is a price issue, right? Accessibility issue. Because they're so expensive, either the government has to subsidize, which again means taxpayers have to pay it, or it's too expensive. Not everybody can afford it. So what this firm has done, because in India we have 2.5 crore vehicles, passenger vehicles that are going to be phased out in the next 2 years, right? In just next 2 years because of laws. They have created a retrofitting kit, which you put it on the old car, because not every car has become useless, right? There are people who don't use their cars a lot. So 80% cars are like that. If you just put that retrofit, it becomes an EV car, and it can ply in Delhi, it can ply in other areas where there are restrictions. So the cost of ownership, is easy for people to switch. And then you have, compliance with, so startups that by design take care of these principles and solve this problem. There are many others I don't want to, there's one that's taking products from the nature, discarded wood and discarded pine seeds, and making them into stationery, furniture and other types of stationery. So there are so many there that are doing amazing stuff.
Connected actually to a whole group of startups across the country in the sustainability space. And there are many examples like this. If you've been to the airport, you've seen Mitti Cafe, who, they actually employ, differently abled people. And then there is, of course, there are many examples. There's people who are like, companies that are doing water, water flow monitoring, so that you reduce the amount of water that you waste. So the good part is the number of companies that are actually working to solve the problems on the ground has immensely grown. And I think I would attribute it to one thing, technology. I think earlier we used to look at processes and systems to, tackle some environmental issues. Today there's technology. And I think technology has really helped scale the kind of solutions and just scale it across, right? So I think, and the investments in climate-related, sustainability-related startups has also grown over the last 2 years. So I think there's a lot of great stuff happening in the space right now.
That's great. At the same time, we also hear so much about greenwashing and pinkwashing when they put one token female person on a panel. Sports washing in case of some countries right now. So is it correct that under the Indian regulation, which is BRSR, companies are not mandated to require an external audit right now? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the audit, so there is a back and forth happening on that, because we were just talking about it earlier. There is not enough assurance or auditor capacity in the ecosystem, and SEBI should have foreseen that, unfortunately. So the thing is, the entire ecosystem is new, is getting built out. We need to think design. We don't need to be reactive. And there's a lot of...
The reason I was asking this question is that if companies are gathering their own data and analyzing their own data and reporting their own data, and no one from the outside is auditing it, then how do we know if anyone's telling the truth?
Exactly. So this has already happened in the West. So 2010, we built a model. I was doing that ratings at those days. Built a model to counter greenwashing, to discover greenwashing, and we saw lots of it actually. Now the issue is, we have to apply it in the context. So in India, a lot of KPIs are being imported from the West, and I've worked there as well. So this thing about gender and DEI, right? In the West, companies are more mature, societies are more mature. There are a lot of women participation already there, even though it's all equally distributed. In India, we are at the early stages, so it's changing, right? In urban cities, it's more. But that's not the important metric in the short run. Long run, it is. Long run, we want more women participation. Short run, it is important to know health and safety of the women. What are the conditions we are providing? So there are cabs that are running, from the IT services centers or GCCs, and then those cabs are not safe. And then there were, a lot of incidents, and then they had to put push buttons to provide for an alarm. And so we have to think design, what stage of our journey we are.
Right. And as somebody who just went through a very rigorous BRSR audit, and I can tell you, so the thing about I think the SEBI regulation, the BRSR, which stands for Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting. So what they require is a company to, of course, report, and then there's a third-party assurance, which is very, very in-depth. And it was extremely extremely difficult, both for the company and for the auditor, because there was no guidelines. I think that was the issue. The issue is not with the regulation. The issue was with the guidelines. And I think as far as, I mean, we're part of a lot of advocacy groups, and no industry is actually saying take away BRSR, right? I mean, or take away independent reporting, because there is a huge value, even for me as a company, there's a huge value if an external auditor looks at my data and validates it, right? It's a huge value, it's for me. So nobody is really saying do away with that. But I think everybody wants clearer guidelines. So I think what's happening with ESG reporting is what was happening with financial reporting a few years ago. It sort of went through all this upheaval. I think it will settle. Right now, there's this whole upheaval, people trying to figure out what this is all about. Is this worth getting onto? Is this something I need? And I think it will settle down. It'll take a year or two, but it'll settle down, and then I think it'll be more streamlined.
And so guidelines for sure, but I think capacity building is another issue. There's capacity building needed across, including in SEBI, including assurance providers, including the companies, and that is why, no really, I mean, jokes apart, because it's a post-lunch session, we decided we'll keep it light and fun, but really it was the reason why, I decided to write it, and I think...
And a second book.
Yeah,
after this.
and more people need to write on this. More people need to have workshops and seminars and a lot of knowledge sharing on this.
Thank you. We're open to questions from the audience now. Yes, please.
Next year, I hope it will complement yours. Just wanted to say this. Moving the basis of the ESG discussion from instrumentality to normative, I think is very important. You can't keep on saying it's going to make you more profit, you will sustain longer. You have to say it is the right thing to do. So I think that's somewhere missing. Somehow we are trying to justify what we all believe in with a business case. And I think that's driving the conversation in the wrong direction. I'd like to hear.
Absolutely right.
From
So,
all of you.
The values, the principles are as important, in the Eastern world. The West is all about processes and KPIs and metrics and data. We are more value-driven people in the East. So for us, it's more important to connect to values, which is why I'm writing more about it. And please do write as well. This is the conversation we need to have.
Yeah. I'll also say, too many times, environmental, sustainability conversations are like preaching to the converted. We're just talking to each other. So if we need to get to those who are maybe sitting on the fence or completely not on board with the idea, then really the profit motive works. I think that's why a lot of this happens as well, right? Yeah, you were saying something.
I was going to say, I think you need to look at it in terms of the value provided to different stakeholders, right? I mean, so that's how Wipro looks at it. So, what is the value you're providing to your investors? What is the value you're providing to your customers and your employees? And then your community and the planet, right? So if you look at it in terms of value creation for your different stakeholders, these are all the stakeholders every company has. So I think looking at it from that angle would be better.
Okay, I have a question. I'd like to ask a question around, is in the Indian context, is there a relationship between, say, share performance and good ESG standards? So this is the elephant in the room, I'd like to ask.
It's too early to look at that relationship right now, even in the West. There are a lot of controversies. This is what we were discussing earlier. That is for another session. The controversies around whether you get alpha or not. This is too early because you have to look at 20 years data at least for you to be able to say something convincing. But There are companies, like we were saying earlier, who have not, you can't label them ESG or sustainability, but they've been doing it for years. The greatest case study is Tata Group. I've documented it here. 150 years, $300 billion market cap. Top 30 groups in the world now, consistently growing without taking shortcuts. Sometimes there can be one or two random incidents because organizations are not homogeneous everywhere. There are people who make mistakes. But broadly, 85, 90% of the time, they are doing in one direction. So that's a great case study. And there are the Japanese one I was saying earlier. So there are good stories. We don't celebrate them enough. But you can call them ESG, but ESG word did not exist in those days.
So I just wanted to be a little controversial here. We all know Ashwath Dhanmodaran has very famously said that ESG is beyond redemption, it must go into the dustbin. So I just want you to comment on that. There's a lot of good things happening, but the packaging is so much, and the greenwashing is so much. So would you like to comment on some of that?
Yeah, sure. Like for example, I think ESG in the US, for example, it's almost a curse word. I mean, you don't want to talk about ESG, right? Nobody wants to talk about ESG. And yeah, sometimes this happens, right? You're constantly talking about this, and with really no result. And there has been a lot of greenwashing. I think to address that is what like basically SEBI's BRSR has come out. From Europe, there's a bunch of regulations that are coming out, CSRD and things like that, to address particularly this greenwashing issue. I think that will solve the problem, but I think you're right, ESG has been overused so much that there is this whole sort of aversion to be associated with anything called ESG. But I'm hoping that thing will change with all these regulations coming up, with independent reporting, with assurance. So you're kind of avoiding that whole greenwashing aspect of it. So hoping it will change.
Radhika, thank you. Vipul, I'm sure you can continue this conversation offline because we've run out of time. Thank you very much. So also very heartened to see the seats are now full. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I request our guests to kindly remain on the dais. Let me also invite Mr. Dhruv Nad onto the dais to present a memento of appreciation for our guests. So please do join us on the dais for the honors.
I also get one. The next one. Giving mementos. I'm neither pretty nor a girl.
We prefer intellect over beauty, so please do join us. Yes, everyone, for this insightful and engaging session. Thank you so much for seamlessly hosting this specific session, and yes, for all the knowledge that you have contributed to this specific Lit Fest. Thank you so much for that. Please do join us in the audience. Yes, we do have a photograph session.